Great relationships don't just happen, they're designed. But how do you get the love you really want when you haven't had the models and examples you needed?
We've learned the hard way that talking about stuff can change everything, but it doesn't come naturally, and that's normal.
Welcome to the Project Relationship Podcast. I'm Dr. Jolie Hamilton.
And I'm Ken Hamilton.
Join us as we explore the ups and downs of creating a custom-built love.
We'll get personal and talk about what's worked for us, hear from Jolie about what the research can teach us about love, and answer listener questions.
It's time to reimagine relationships from the ground up. Welcome to the Project Relationship Podcast. Creative monogamy. Going to talk about creative monogamy today. I've been using this phrase for a few years to describe something that I've heard put a lot of different ways. You know, people talk about monogamish, or Tammy Nelson has a wonderful new book out called Open Monogamy. But those both have this, there is a difference here, because both of those terms start with a sort of, there's an opening, like the presumption that there could be an opening. And I'm talking about creative monogamy from the perspective that you're actually going to look at the things you want to have exclusive, and it may still be entirely, like, you might experience no real alteration of what's exclusive for you.
Right.
But you invite a lot more creativity into your relationship. That's it. I think that there are a lot of ways to talk about this. I think it's fascinating. I'm so glad that there's so much conversation about the massive diversity of relating styles and ways that we relate. It's not just this simple dichotomy of like non-monogamy and monogamy. It's just not. We can't sort these things into two camps, two piles. So I love that there's this complexity happening. And yeah, I wanted to talk to you today about creative monogamy, even though, we have this philosophical commitment to consensual non-monogamy that, I love. But because we are busy people.
Yeah.
A lot of time, and there's a pandemic, and there's all kinds of stuff.
Part of it doesn't come up all that much.
Well, I wouldn't say not all that much at all.
Okay, I guess relative to what it might if it weren't for these.
I would definitely put that the other way. What I would say is that practicing creativity in our monogamy when we are in a period of time, or when each of us is just for whatever reason we're not having other relationships. That's been critical.
Oh yeah. Yep.
It's been critical for me to feel okay in our relationship and to not feel boxed in or cloistered or bored.
Bored, right? Fine.
Yeah, fine. That's Ken's key word. He knows word. If he hears me say fine.
That was fine. Uh-oh.
Nothing about that was... Well, nothing about it was great.
Nothing about it was great. Not even good. Fine's not even good.
Although I think good is very close to fine. Good.
Close, but I think fine's even below good.
Okay.
Anyway.
So let's get past fine. Let's get past good and talk about what it looks like to practice being creatively monogamous, to practice creative monogamy. So first, let's define what we're talking about when we say monogamy. You know me, I love defining terms.
Okay.
So I'm thinking about people who have agreed to a level of exclusivity around different parts of their life. And often that exclusivity includes things like your sexual contact, your emotional depth of contact, finances, fantasies, contact, like who you're allowed, your social contact, not just your friendships, but like who you share social space with. Some exclusivity around types of activities that can be undertaken. Often there is a gender bias that you're sort of expected to adhere to with your friendships and things. The bottom line is your monogamy is what you make of it. I think that, I talk about a boilerplate version of monogamy all the time because that's great shorthand for me to get across a point. But in reality, it's not like there's not some arbiter out there of what monogamy is in practice.
In practice. So there is this cultural cookie cutter of what relationships are supposed to be like.
But nobody's ever seen that cookie cutter.
Nobody's ever seen that cookie. And nobody's ever seen that cookie because even though the culture is sort of applying pressure for relationships to be a particular way, we all do what we do.
Right. There's the thing. We're all
it's
out
all
there
different.
doing what we're doing and co-creating a relationship with one or more people. But so in monogamy, let's just talk about, imagine that you've created a relationship with this one other person and there's a level of exclusivity to it. I think that a great place to start talking about creative monogamy is to get clear on what you're doing right now.
Yes.
And I mean, I think you'll hear me come back to that over and over and over again. But for you and I, the whole beginning was me saying, what are we doing? And you saying, I'm sorry, that was the sound of crickets?
Yeah.
You saying, really nothing. I mean, we would actually be in the car driving to work. We owned a business together, driving to that business. And I would ask some questions about what we were doing or I would try to get clarity on what exactly. Now, we weren't talking about a monogamy agreement, but we were talking about relating agreements and relating, like, what are we doing? Now, what I mean is, what are we doing tonight? Really, what are we doing? And then silence.
There would just, my brain would just start spinning and whirling and getting tangled up, and it would all happen all on the inside. Instead of talking to you about my confusion and uncertainty about what was acceptable, both for me, for you, and very much so at the time, lots of people who I thought might be watching.
Well, and yes, people you at least imagined.
I imagined.
Right?
Totally.
There's the thing. So in our monogamy agreements, which often don't even exist. Often there is no real explicit agreement. But in our monogamy agreements, let's say we took vows of marriage or whatever, or we're dating and we've had to define the relationship talk that included some basic ground rules. A lot of times there's an imagined watcher. There's this imagination of like being watched and being like we're supposed to behave a way. And that's supposed to. There is this imagination of someone who could judge whether we're in bounds or out of bounds. And often that person isn't even our partner. But more importantly, it's not us.
Yeah.
And that's what concerns me. So when we talk about creative monogamy, I want to encourage everyone. Because I want everything to be talk-aboutable. I want everything to be talk-aboutable because you just named the biggest hindrance in our relationship ever, which has not been the complexity of having multiple partners or having 7 children.
It was that all my confusion, uncertainty, thoughts, imaginations, fantasies were all on the inside.
And not bringing them out. Sharing them and working on that confusion, not just with me, but I mean, it took years before you found anybody who you could open up to therapeutically either. Years and multiple tries to find somebody who could be there for you, could be patient that way for you. And luckily you did. And luckily it was someone who could hold a real father figure role
it was
for
great.
you.
He was great.
Well, now I'm going to all tear up.
I know.
Our wonderful analyst Thayer Green passed away this month. And it's a loss to the world for certain. But I digress.
So,
you not being willing to bring that all out and like work it over.
Yeah.
At first, I really believed you. You would talk about how you didn't have any words. Like I would get you just as far as you could say, like, I don't know how to talk about that. But you would encourage me to believe that you were working on it inside.
Mm-hmm.
And while I know that is true for some people, over the years, what we found was You weren't.
Nope. I was
just
working on it
weren't.
right then in that moment, and then I was
And in
moving
sort
on
of
to other
like,
things.
we were a
and
little
it
like a
wasn't-
dog chasing his own tail. It was just a
very
really
mu-
tight
yeah.
little circle.
I personally don't have all that much skill at like looking at myself and figuring stuff out. I got to bring it out. I got to talk to other people.
Yeah, so
That's me.
You are good at it, but you when you bring it out and
Yeah.
you get a little. So this is, I think of like get a little distance from it so that you can observe yourself. Another way to do that is writing.
Yeah.
Writing, and you did
And
find
I've
that
had
tool
some
would
some
work.
help. Yeah,
Right,
some
so you
help
would
out of
start
that.
working through
Yeah.
by writing out, what am I doing? And I remember we would be arguing over something, and it would get like hard and heated, not in a good way.
Not that kind of hot.
And you would go and you would just write 5 or 6 pages in your journal and just like write it out and come back. And when you came back, you had all these words.
Yeah.
You had so many words and you could talk to me. So step 1, for creative monogamy, I want to encourage people to figure out what you're doing right now. What is your monogamy all about? What's it for? Sure. But also just, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You know,
what are you doing? Where are the boundaries? What are the agreements?
So the word monogamy, like right there, like this mono, okay, it's about an agreement to have this exclusivity around what exactly? So I would love to encourage people to have talks about what exclusivity looks like. Yeah, sure, sexually. I mean, because we can go right there. That's the deep end,
Can
though.
go right there.
That's probably the hard stuff. So I would actually start with some simpler stuff. Most people find finances to be a really fraught area to talk about. But what I've noticed working with lots and lots of people is more people are comfortable talking about how they want their exclusivity to work in finances than in the bedroom.
Okay.
Because they have some clarity, like they understand there is a level of complexity. It's hard to have multiple signers on accounts, like past 2. It adds levels of it's not impossible, but that adds complexity. So a lot of people come at that from just a very practical, like, well, this is what we're doing and it works for us. We have my account, your account, and our account, and here's how we handle our finances. But more importantly, here's how we handle our financial exclusivity. Who do we talk to about our finances? Do we talk to a financial advisor?
Here's how we handle it. Yeah.
Do I talk to my mother? I can't talk to my mother. I guess I could.
You can talk to
I
your
would
mother.
not talk to my mother about this, though.
well,
My mother was a lovely human, but not about
that wasn't her
finances.
strength.
Woo-hoo, no way. That would not be helpful. We could have a good laugh over finances, I guess. But talking about exclusivity around that is, I find that it's often a fairly simple one. People are like, well, we share finances only with each other. And so you want to dabble in a little bit of creativity. You say, okay, well, how do you make space to know that each of you have access to some discretionary money that you get to spend without having to get buy-in or consent, or why, like, it's yours to do with what you want. Everybody's going to have their own deal with that.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to have their own thing. So I find that one tends to go pretty smoothly for people who come to me and they want to work on monogamy agreements and they're trying to stretch their imagination. So often I'll actually start there and people are surprised. They're like, really? We're going to start with money? But I found it can be fairly simple. Sometimes what we'll do is talk about creating that fun exercise of saying, well, how much discretionary money can we afford to get into a little separate pocket so we can have a little distance and a little fun that way without creating a sense of fear or worry. How much separation can I tolerate there?
Yeah.
And that has been a fun conversation for some of my clients to have. And then, gosh, there are so many more.
Well,
There's
there
so
are.
many more. It's not like we don't have to rush right to the sex, but let's talk about fantasy.
Okay. Sure. Yep.
Okay. When we're talking about exclusivity and we talk about sex, usually what I ask clients to separate out, like, well, okay, there's sex. First, let's have the what is sex conversation. If you haven't had that, go back and listen to the episode, What is Sex? It's a key thing. You can also download my What is Sex guide by going to listentojolie.com. But have that conversation. But what about fantasy?
Yeah.
Where are the boundaries?
Where are the boundaries?
And where can I have some creativity? So this might look like, for instance, can I fantasize? Do you feel good about me fantasizing about imaginary people or magical beings or movie stars who I'm never going to meet? Mm-hmm. How does that feel for you? And there's a whole conversation to have in there. Now, I'm not suggesting that your partner should be limiting your fantasy life, but I'm saying this can be a generative conversation around like, right. Ooh. So this start in the realm of completely non-physical beings. How does it feel for you to think about me imagining these creatures in a sexual way? Like, how does it feel for you to think about me fantasizing over people I've imagined up out of nothing?
And so it sounds like you're saying not so much. This isn't so much about the conversation about the fantasies themselves.
Yeah, that's like another layer.
Yeah, but it's about how we each feel about it and how that can influence our relationship. Like how can we use that, appreciate that, and avoid things that are really uncomfortable. It's information about how
I had somebody come to me once and they were furious because their partner was dreaming about other people and had told them. I mean... Well, I would say I had nothing to say, except that, of course I did. I mean, I was trained in Jungian psychology. I care about dreams. I really do. And I take the unconscious very seriously. But the idea that our partner needs to somehow control their nighttime dreams, that was something to unwind. And the real cost to this was once her partner had felt this, had felt the intensity of her rage over his oh my gosh, the rage she felt over his having dreamed about just a made up other person. He clamped down, he closed down so much that it was really challenging to open up and make some creative space. This is where it becomes really, really advantageous to question yourself. Wait, could I control? Like a little perspective taking is in order. Mm-hmm. Wait, could I control my dreams?
Little putting yourself in the other person's shoes and
a little empathy and a little perspective taking. Could I actually change this for myself? But let's head back to actually trying to make some generative yumminess out of this creative monogamy idea. Opening up space to not only talk about our fantasies from the perspective of the fact that they exist at all, but then getting to a spot where can we share our fantasies? Because sharing fantasy could look like there can be learning about each other's boundaries. You have some sexual predilections that are not mine, right? And I don't necessarily want to hear all of those words. Cool, but I get to learn about. I mean, I only know that I have some boundaries there because you were willing to share them in small doses. We share them, and I say, you know what, that doesn't work for me, or it doesn't work for me like that. How about if we talk about it this way? How about if we tweak that fantasy so that it becomes something we can share?
And that's about how I share with you, not about what I fantasize about.
Right. I never asked you not to fantasize about it.
You didn't ask about that, but you...
In fact, I kind of like the idea. I get off on that. I enjoy the fact that you have an independent fantasy life. For me, that's very similar to the compersion I feel when I'm watching you have sex with someone else, or I'm enjoying the idea of you on a date with someone else. I just like the feeling of, oh, you have a whole thing going on over there that's separate from me. But that took practice. Mm-hmm. And the practice of it in fantasy was much easier than the
Right.
practice of watching it up close.
Yep.
Although, I mean, I do have a certain interest in like literally watching you up close, engaging with others. But the practice of really, really acknowledging how profoundly other you are.
Yeah, about the otherness, right?
Even though
And
we're so intermingled and we're so close. Yeah, like knowing that your fantasy life is so different is powerful to me. And you had to be really courageous. That took a lot for you to be courageous about
because of
sharing.
where I was coming from, that was a lot for me to start doing that.
And this is an opportunity to learn about boundaries in multiple ways, because sometimes there are words that don't feel good to another person, like the actual words. Like, well, it makes me think of like somebody not liking the word moist. Right? It doesn't really matter what the word is. Maybe it's a word you use for a body part, or maybe it's a word you use to describe someone's behavior. I know people who hate the word slut. I know people who love the word slut. It's just, so personal. So learning how to negotiate around the language so that, because the fantasy itself might be fine, might even be yummy to share, but maybe the language needs some tweaking,
how the
creating.
language can work for.
But learning to create
both.
shared language is, that's it. When we talk about communication, what we're talking about is creating something together.
Yeah.
Communication is about that in between, not about, can I explain this to you? Explain means to literally comes from the Latin to lay flat. That's very different from to commune. Very different things.
Where we're both, sort of dipping into that pool and finding out what's going on for us, and also I'm watching you figure out what you can
watch you, and I watch you watch me.
Yeah, right, and back and forth.
So fantasy is, I think, my favorite conversation, because when people want to work with me and they're like, yep, but I'm not interested in consensual non-monogamy. Like, that's fine. That's more than fine. I'm thrilled that you know that that's not for you, because sometimes people try to force fit. Like, I'm going to have all the things, and I should want all the things. Well, who said? There's no right or wrong here. Monogamy might be exactly the right fit for you, but maybe you want a monogamy that has in it space for you to really share fantasies that are edgy and different, or maybe they're just fantasies that are very simple, but you've just never had a chance to share them. I think the first fantasy I shared with you was not complicated. It was very simple. It was not super multidimensional. Yeah. But the sharing of it deepens the relationship in many ways.
It was really intimate and connecting.
Right. And we weren't even actually having sex.
No.
Then. It was just the words.
Yep.
It was just talking about the what if, and it was about imaginal figures. It wasn't about real people.
Yep.
So there's another layer. What about imagining? What about fantasy that's about people you know? Because this is a place where I find people often get hung up. Many of us have either nighttime dreams or daytime fantasies or just daydreams, or we foster fantasies of people we have met in real life. Mm-hmm. So, okay, let's level up this conversation about fantasy. How's that work for you? I think of this as a real place where we can work on what it means to trust ourselves, to trust our partners, and to trust that we're actively creating a fidelity agreement. If we're doing fidelity, if we're staying within boundaries of explicit, resilient agreements, cool, then theoretically, fantasy could fit in there. And in fact, we have done this. So we did a year of conscious monogamy choice right after we got married, and it was great. And I can't even imagine having not fantasized and share with you fantasies of people I knew and we had met in real life.
Yeah.
Because that's just part of... I didn't even realize that this was a thing people didn't do, because I'd been doing it my whole life. I'd always shared that way.
And people don't talk about their fantasies all that much, so how would you find out?
Right. So it never occurred to me that just because we were intentionally holding a monogamous boundary around our sexual experiences that applied to my fantasy
as well.
It never occurred to me, but from out here, I'm like, ooh, this is actually a big deal. I see this show up in my consultation room over and over again, where people are like, whoa, that is definitely an edge for me.
So there's a conversation to be had.
Right, but other times what happens is people will find out, and this happened recently, where I found out independently during independent sessions with people that each of them thought that the other one would never want to hear these fantasies. Great. Awesome. Now we have someplace to go, because in fact, this was just a thing neither one of them felt courageous enough to bring up. And that was because they did not feel the resilience of the relationship. It wasn't really even, like.
So that was absolutely something that held me back, was the idea that saying something was going to break.
That's it. Right. So it's not really about the thing. I didn't sense from either of these two people that they really believed that what they were doing was wrong, or that their partner even would really hate it. But they were just feeling a lack of trust that they could deal with whatever it was going to bring up. And one of them, it wound up really looking like they just didn't want the hassle. They're like, that sounds like a lot of work. I just don't want to deal with it. And the other one genuinely had no idea. Like, well, if I bring it up and it goes wrong, then what? Cool. Now you're into, we can push the boundaries of our imagination by understanding what our resiliency is.
Yeah, right.
And, I don't want to be too trite, but you've survived all your bad days so far. So good job you, good job me. But if you stay within the bounds that you've imagined, your life will be smaller than it could be. Like, the imagination is kind of like the universe. Always continuing outward, always expanding outwards. But it's also easy to constrain it. And to put
really
up
easy.
Artificial boundaries and say, nope, I'm only going to stay in here. Resiliency in relating can allow you to really start exploring these things. So one of the things I like to talk about, you and I do, if there's something that is edgy, or, we're not sure about how the conversation's going to go, we set ourselves up for success by not saying, we have to talk about something later, but instead saying, I would love to have a juicy, yummy, romantic date with you where we're just talking about something new. It's something we haven't talked about before, but I'm not like, this isn't a must-have. I want to enjoy this conversation with you. And if it doesn't feel good, I want to say that we can call time on it at any point. It's going to be fine. Like, so we set ourselves up for success by setting up the resiliency. It's going to be okay to press time on this, or to say, whoa, I didn't know that this was there. And remind myself of who you are, and that we have negotiated so many challenging things. I don't know anybody who's been together with their long-term partner for, more than a few months, that hasn't survived some stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Negotiated some stuff.
Yep.
So believing that you can, in fact, be resilient is a big deal. And then creating having your safe word in place. How are we going to press pause on this conversation?
Yeah. So say more about that.
Sure. So, a safe word isn't just for kinky bedroom stuff. A safe word is great. We use a nice funny word. We'll use a word like biscuit or turquoise or something like that.
Just a word you say that like, whoa, I'm going to need to pause. It could be as simple as pause as well. That's fine. Can I pause this conversation? But a safe word that's funny, I find very helpful myself, because that way I can wait. Right. So I heard my partner say biscuit. That's a very strange word to hear right now. They're feeling vulnerable. Okay, cool. This isn't actually about just the thing we're talking about. This is also about, now my partner's feeling vulnerable. How am I feeling? Check in with myself.
which requires me to shut my dang mouth and actually check in rather than try to take care of you too soon.
Yeah, right.
Because that is my impetus. I want to take care. Move too fast, but just slow down. So one of the things we do is touch again. If we've moved away from each other, touch again. We're touching right now. You have your hand on my thigh. I have my hand on your shoulder. We're touching because we're talking about something sensitive, even right now.
Yep.
And for us, touch is one of our resiliency skills. If everything has gone awry, a heart-to-heart hug goes a long way.
Yeah.
Eye contact for us goes a long way.
So we know what our what things help
What
stabilize,
strategies.
or what strategies
Yeah.
to stabilize our connection when we might be in a shaky spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's let us have some really thrilling conversations
Thrilling
that
is a
have
good word for it.
shifted our relationship agreement, like without us even realizing we're having a relationship agreements chat.
Yeah, right.
So creative monogamy is going to be whatever you make of it. It's not going to be just one thing. I want to really dive deep into this conversation. This is going to be many, many parts. We've been talking
there's
about
so much to
consensual
talk about.
non-monogamy so much, but creative monogamy is really just part of it. I've written some papers about this. This thing we call relationship is so much more vast than any single word like polyamory or monogamy could possibly allow for. I want to open up some space around what I called in my dissertation a polyimaginal realm of relating. Like, let's just bust this thing open and find out what works for us, what works for our partner, and how we can really use our relationship as a growth-oriented and fun place. Because there's the thing, so often, like relationship work. We talk about relationship work.
Yeah, like it's
have some
going to be
relationship
that
play.
we need to talk conversation.
Creative monogamy
Oh,
can
I love
absolutely
that.
be about relationship play.
Relationship play, yeah. Not
Which-
relationship work.
If I'm playing tag, I might accidentally knock you down. Like
Right.
we could literally go out in the yard and play tag and I might knock you down.
Yep.
And then run over, grab you, make sure you're okay,
Yep.
check in with you, apologize if it was actually my fault, or simply say like, whoa, sorry you slipped on that.
Yep.
And get back to the fun in whatever way we want. Maybe we want to change the game. Maybe we want to change what we're doing. Whatever it is, relationship work is important, but relationship fun? Let's have more of that.
I agree, and that's in line with something that I've been thinking about here, which is you talked about stretching the imagination, exploring each other's imagination. For my
The universe just got bigger.
the universe just got bigger because I imagined a little bit more. That exploring each other's imagination is a way of finding new things that work well and you can enjoy in your relationship. That's the creative part of creative monogamy, or one of the ways that you can get at that creative part. And I love imagining, so stretching my imagination is fun.
And you have been a bit more introverted. Okay, a lot more introverted than me.
More.
A lot more. And this is a place where you've actually really been able to help me stretch, because you have a very rich inner world, and I tend to be out and point a lot of my energy out. So this is a way that you have brought so much depth to our relationship by allowing me to sort of, and this is a challenging concept in some ways, allowing me to enter your imaginal space, allowing me to sort of enter your introversion.
Yeah.
And experience that with you. I mean, I don't want to live in your system. I don't want to become enmeshed.
But I can paint the pictures and create something that you can
Right. So it's not just
interact
about
with.
us creating something outside of the two of us, but you also actively inviting me into that. Yeah, absolutely has not just enriched, but made my world bigger. There are so many other ways that creative monogamy can be put into practice. This will not be the last you hear of it. I'm creating new content around it all the time, in fact, because I think everybody is out there creatively making their relationship So let's keep having this conversation.
Let's keep talking to each other.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode. I've got one more thing I'd like to share with you, and that you're just going to need to hop over to the website listentojolie.com. There you can grab my top 5 relationship guides for free right now.
Go get those guides. They're great. They're easy to implement conversations that will help you take action in creating the love you really want.
It's my mission to make absolutely everything talk-aboutable.
She managed to help me be able to talk about stuff that I once couldn't even imagine saying out loud. Now I speak openly with my lovers, my friends, my family, and you on a podcast out loud. Relationship work really can change everything.
That really is a wonder. One of my favorite things in the whole world. So when you're feeling the rough edges, when things aren't going the way that you'd hoped in your relationships, I want you to remember that relationships can be messy, and that's good news.